happy to see you guys. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Annalie Kate, CEO here for Route Consultant. Last week, got the privilege of doing my first webinar co-host back after maternity leave. Excited to be here again the next week. So really fun to be back in the action and with you guys talking about everything that's happening in the FedEx space. So for those of you that are joining us here for the first time today or my repeat offenders, I'm so glad that you guys are here and looking forward to our topic for today. Really quick before I get started, one thing that I definitely have to do really fast is just our disclaimer. So Route Consultant is not endorsed by and is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation and FedEx Ground. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, and is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation and FedEx Ground. All that means is that you will not hear any materially non-public information here today, but we do hope that you will hear some materially helpful information here today. I have got a special co-host with me here today that I'm very excited to have first time making an appearance on one of our Route Consultant webinars. We're gonna have Leah Nelson joining us. She heads up all of our financial analysis and the development of all the inventory and listings that you guys see on our website. So she's gonna be here talking through how to review one of our listing prospectuses, some of the important questions that we see, some of the initial due diligence pieces, and really just giving you an overview of how that entire process works. So I'm super excited to have her here joining us for the webinar today. So she's going to be coming on in just a few minutes. One thing that if you know anything about Route Consultant webinars, is that we always have a question of the day. So in order to ask us a question in the live Q&A segment at the end of the webinar today, you first have to answer a question. This is a long-standing tradition. Again, one of the things I miss the most while I've been away. And so today's question chosen by Leah is going to be, if you could be any animal for a day, what would you be and why? So which either furry creature or underwater creature or whatever, what would you choose that you think is living the life and why? So one thing to note too is when you submit those answers as well as your questions on any topic that you have questions about, we'd ask that you submit those in the Q&A button at the bottom. So rather than the chat feature, I'm going to be manning that Q&A panel. So you'll just click that to submit any questions that you have. And again, it can be on today's topic. It can be on anything that's happening in the industry. I'm happy to walk through and address those pieces with you guys. So last thing before we jump into our content for today is I want to hit you really fast with the inventory that's going to be hitting our public site today. We have on the P&D side, 15 P&D routes in Kansas listed at 1.45 million. It's only 77% of revenue on that one. That opportunity has a manager in place that's got a ton of tenure behind them, which is always really great to see. Solid operating margins, spare vehicles, good solid, again, from a long-term tenure, a well-established workforce on that one. We also think the Kansas opportunity might be SBA eligible, which again is always a special find. In northern central Maryland, we've got 8 P&D routes listed at 1.299 million. That opportunity has 2 managers in place, several spare vehicles, really well-run business. This is probably some of the highest profit margins that we've seen on a P&D business in a while. So really strong performance on this one. Great territory, really nice affluent area, like traffic, no problems there. Are under scale as well for this one. So a good solid opportunity there in Maryland. In Central Virginia, I've got 16 P&D routes listed at 1.3 million. Again, strong margins on this one, 2 managers in place that are really handling the bulk of the day-to-day operations on this one. Lots of tenure there, spare vehicles, really profitable, right on the coastline. So not a bad view if you're going to be moving cardboard for the day. And again, a low mileage opportunity for that one as well. And then for line haul, always popular location, we've got line haul 3 runs in Central Florida listed at 650. This is 1 dedicated solo and 2 unassigned solos. This is a really good kind of starter package for somebody looking to break into line haul in a super attractive market. Has a spare tractor with it, producing good, solid, mid to low 20% margins on this. Again, a kind of desirable location and just a really great kick-in opportunity. So that's what I've got for you guys this week. So all that being said, we are going to dive in, and I'm going to bring on my co-host Leah here, and we will dive in and start talking through the listing process and what our marketing materials look like, and where we go from there. So Leah, feel free to come on and join us. Hello.
Yeah, hi.
I'm so happy you're here.
Yeah, me too. Super excited to be on my first webinar today. I'm just really excited to be here and go through the prospectus and everything you need to know about it. So I guess should I answer? Am I supposed to answer the question of the day right now?
Well, no, we'll come back around. So she's excited about answering her question. I
know. I'll hold off on that, y'all. We'll get into the other important stuff first. So so go ahead and just dive into the prospectus.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and start and kind of give us an overview, Leah, of your world, right? In terms of when we're looking at a prospectus as either a prospective buyer or a potential seller that's looking to sell their business. Give us kind of an idea of what we can expect and take it from wherever you want to take it.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, thank you so much for letting me be here. I'm Leah. I'm our production and compliance director here at Route Consultant. So I've worked here almost 5 years next month. So very familiar with the whole prospectus process and everything, been doing it for many, many years. My team, we're the ones who assist sellers in getting the information, compiling it all, putting it all together and making these wonderful PDFs for every business that we sell. So they're designed to be an overview of a business that you're interested in. So we'll go through some of the highlights of this, and I'll tell you some places as a buyer where you're going to want to ask a couple more questions to get more details. And then potential due diligence items that you'll want to request as you look at the prospectus. So the one we're going to walk through today, I'm going to share it here in just a minute. It is just an example. So it is not a business that we've currently got on the market. If you are interested in a business of this size or this location or what have you, we very likely have similar businesses on the market. So certainly check out our website or talk to someone on the team, and we're happy to help you help find the best business for you. So I'll go ahead and pull this up. All right, perfect. Can you see that, Annalie?
Yep, it just came through. Perfect.
Excellent. So we'll zip through some of these pages and we'll get a little bit more in depth on some. But first and foremost, of course, here we've got the page with the business name. It normally has the business name here at the top, P&D Inc. for this one, and then the location of the business, which is very important. One thing you'll notice on here as well is we've got our contact information for Route Consultant right here at the bottom. So if you don't have the contact information for the specific broker of the business, you can contact the hotline number here or the email address, and we can connect you with whoever you're trying to reach. So that's going to be there on the front page. The second page here is just disclosures. I'll let you read that at your leisure when you request a prospectus. We won't have to go through that right now. Table of contents, again, fairly self-explanatory on that one. And now on page 4 here, we start to get really into the details of the specific business that you're looking at. So right here at the top, first and foremost, and arguably the most important part is the price of the business. So definitely want to make sure that's within your range of what you're looking for. We do help guide sellers on how to price their businesses. So we look at several factors here. We look at the net income of the business, the quality of the fleet, timeline of the sale, and try to assist sellers in pricing their business appropriately for their goals, as well as for what the market is currently supporting. So price is right up there, as well as right below that, we've got the multiple and the percentage of revenue. And the multiple is calculated by dividing the price by the net income, and the percentage of revenue is calculated by the price divided by the revenue, the annual revenue. So you'll see there right below, we've got the green boxes of the revenue, the expenses, and the net income. I'll get into those calculations in just a little bit. We've got a page that flushes that out. So we'll go through that here in just a few minutes. Same with the operational summary here. It's a summary, and most of this information is outlined in more detail on further pages that we'll go over here in just a little bit. But one thing as a buyer that you can look at on this page, just a real quick glance, is the truck to route ratio is important, because those two pieces of information are just right here, right together. So you want to make sure that you've got enough trucks to run your routes. And if you don't, that's not necessarily a problem. Say this business had 7 trucks and 9 routes, and you're short 2 trucks. Just make sure it's priced appropriately, that you can get 2 more trucks and complete your fleet. So it's not necessarily an issue if it's short trucks. It's just you need to go into it knowing you're going to have to purchase more trucks and make sure that you can afford that. So that's just one quick thing you can look at here on this page. Also here at the bottom, we've got a revenue chart and a stop chart showing that growth normally over 12 months is the range that we put on here. So definitely take a look at that. Normally it'll remain relatively steady or incrementally increase over the course of 12 months. As a buyer, if you look at this and you see any major spikes or any major declines, certainly ask the seller about that. Perhaps they purchased some routes, they sold some routes, or made some fundamental changes to the business that would have caused those steep inclines or declines. So definitely ask about that as part of your due diligence. One thing you'll see on this one in particular is we do have that spike on here. So I'd look at that, look at the date ranges, and you'll see that it's during peak season. So in pretty much all prospectuses, you're going to see that spike during peak season. No need to ask about that. You know what that's from, but say you see something weird in July, some weird change, definitely ask about that as a buyer. Moving on to the next page here, we've got the business overview. Again, all of this is meant to be an overview. It's just a quick snapshot of the business. In the background section here, you'll see how long the business has been owned, any fun facts about the business, if it's a really dense CSA, perhaps the fleet is really wonderful. You'll see that here in the background section. Moving to the management structure, this is where you'll find out if there are managers that are coming with the business, or no managers coming with the business, and then a brief snapshot of their responsibilities, as well as a snapshot of the owner's responsibilities as well, and how involved they are with the business. This is one of those areas as a buyer, like I said, this is meant to be an overview. You'll want to speak with the seller specifically about those day-to-day responsibilities of the manager and the owner to see who does DRO, who does the route counts, payroll, all those types of things. So definitely have a conversation with the seller about those types of things, and take this as just an overview. Same with the benefits and bonuses as well. This will give you a brief couple of sentences about it if they offer vacation time or health insurance, or if there's per stop bonuses that the drivers get, what have you. We'll get a little snapshot of that here, but definitely ask about the specifics of those to the seller. When those bonuses are paid out, what makes an employee eligible, all those types of things. You'll want to get into that in your due diligence period. Also at the bottom here of the page, you'll have some financing details. So if we think the business is possibly SBA eligible, you'll see a little check mark down there that says it's SBA eligible. If that check mark is not down there, it is probably not SBA eligible. So that's where you'll find that piece of information. Same with seller financing, if any seller financing is being offered. Sometimes the amount's on there, sometimes it's not, but if there's seller financing that the seller is willing to do, we'll have that listed down there as well. And then assumable truck debt if there's any of that. Now, moving on to the financials page. So this is a 12-month projection for the business. So it is we take recent information, as absolute recent we can get, and project it over 12 months forward. So it's not a historical look. It's not anything like that. It is a forward projection. We do believe in looking at a business as it currently operates right now. That's super important to us. We're not looking at what the business did a year ago or 2 years ago. We're looking at what it's doing right now and projecting that over 12 months. So what we do here is we take the last 6 to 8 weeks of data as best we can, and project it over 12 months, like I said. So for total revenue, we take 6 to 8 weeks of settlement statements, average those, and come up with a revenue figure. So certainly as a buyer, definitely recommend settlement statements from your seller. Take a look at those. If you don't know what a settlement statement is, those are the revenue statements that FedEx produces every week. They come out every Tuesday night, I believe. But as a buyer, definitely request those. They're going to be a fundamental part of your FedEx journey, is looking at settlement statements. So get really familiar with those. One thing to note on our revenue projections here is we don't include growth or peak season in the revenue projection. So we don't allocate any, no 5% for the growth that could happen over the 12 months. We do try to be fairly conservative with our revenue figures. And then in peak, like I said, you do earn extra revenue during peak as well, but we don't include any of that. So it's just a straight line 12-month projection. Moving into the expenses here. So for driver wages, we do a very similar process. We take the last 6 to 8 weeks of payroll records from the seller and use those to make this projection. We do use the drivers that are currently running the routes. So those are the ones that are represented here. However, by the time a business closes, which can be, 3 months in the future, 4 months, what have you, some of the staffing is going to look different. So that's something that as a buyer, you want to keep up looking at those payroll records through the process. So request them at the beginning and then also before you close as well, because you're probably going to have a couple of different drivers. So don't expect it to look exactly the same as this, but it should look quite similar. Same for fuel. We do try to get very specific with the fuel calculations here. So they are route specific as well as area specific. So we do look at the individual miles that the routes travel. If it's a carve out, we look at the mileage for the specific routes in the sale. So it is about as specific as you can get. And we look at fuel prices in the area as well to come up with that number. Like I said, it is quite specific. One thing we do use as well for that fuel projection is weekly service worksheets. So that's how we get the mileage for the business. As a buyer, I highly recommend requesting weekly service worksheets as well. It shows you how many routes were run on a weekly basis, what drivers ran those routes, how many miles they did, how many stops they did, just really valuable information. They're really helpful when you're a contractor as well to track your drivers and track your performance on a weekly basis. So getting familiar with those is really important as well. I do recommend you only need a couple of weeks of those. You don't need 12 months of weekly service worksheets. 3 to 4 weeks of those will do to really get an idea of how the business is currently performing. Some of the smaller expenses on here, we've got plates, and some of the ones a little bit lower we'll get into. Plates are around roughly $200 per truck in most places. Scanners we've got right below it. Now scanners are contractor specific, so they can either lease or own their scanners. So that's another due diligence item that I recommend speaking with the seller about, is what their scanner strategy is and what type of scanners you'll be inheriting, whether they're leased or they're owned, and the cost of both of those, because they can be different depending on what the current contractor is doing. So that's a due diligence item to add to your list for sure. Moving down a little bit lower, we've got payroll taxes and workers' compensation. So those are going to be based on your state that you live in. Those rates are going to be a little bit different. As a first-time contractor, for your workers' compensation rate, you'll start out with a mod score of 1, which means that you're going to start at the state average workers' compensation rate. So that's what we use in most of our projections here. I do recommend, though, as again, another due diligence item, requesting the current rate for the current operator. Sometimes they can have, if they've had a really, really good safety history, they can have a really good workers' compensation score. The longer history you have of safe operations, the lower that workers' compensation rate is going to be. So sometimes you can inherit those rates from current contractors. It's a little bit extra work and paperwork, but sometimes it can be worth it if it's a really good rate. So again, as part of your due diligence, find out what the current contractor's workers' compensation rate is. Again, we've got some of these smaller expenses in here, things like meter, safety training, navigation assistance. These are all contractor choices. So definitely, they're all subscriptions in most cases. So definitely speak with the contractor about what their current subscriptions are, with what companies they're with, and what services are included in those. I know sometimes safety training and navigation assistance are rolled into one cost or what have you. We try to represent those as best we can here in the prospectus as accurately as the seller is currently operating them. But definitely ask about that as well, and what, so what companies they're using and all those types of things. So you can go ahead and just, if you choose to inherit those to have a smooth transition, you can do that. And down here, one of the largest expenses, of course, equipment maintenance and rental. It's going to be secondary to payroll is your largest expense in most cases. Fuel maybe sometimes too, but equipment maintenance and rental. So what we use here is you look at the fleet, we look at the age of the fleet as a whole, if it's newer, if it's older, and we also look at the daily miles of the route. So if it's really urban, they don't do a lot of miles per day, or if it's really rural and they do a ton of miles per day, and we try to put a conservative estimate on that. So if they're doing a lot of miles with an older fleet, we're going to have a higher repair and maintenance projection. If it's a really newer fleet with urban, like an urban territory, we'll put a lower repair and maintenance number on that. We do try to be fairly conservative here with this repair and maintenance number, really just to protect everyone. You really never know what can happen to a truck at any time. Unfortunately, things happen. We do try to be, like I said, conservative with this to cover any of those kind of accidental things that you don't expect. It's better to over project on repair and maintenance than under project on that number. So we do try to be conservative with that one.
Yeah, I would say with that one too, it's an important note there that, one of the reasons that we analyze repair and maintenance the way that we do and do the overstating there is it's so frequent in looking even at historical financials that it's not an intentional understatement by contractors, but you could imagine what a day in the life looks like, right? Of, you take something into the shop really quick and you pay an invoice just on the go, right? Getting something fixed. They're so moving targets on that day-to-day on the repair and maintenance. And so it's not uncommon, again, to see that as a category that can be understated historically, just because it's hard to keep the records, and having perfect records and itemized records on every vehicle is not, very typical in the space. So again, that's why you'll see us be a little more conservative there. And we've definitely seen that strategy pay off in terms of customer satisfaction for both buyers and sellers, right? For the last decade of making sure that we're being conservative there to protect all parties so that everybody goes in with the right expectation on what those costs are going to look like. So it's a super important one.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Thank you. Perfect. So that's the primary overview of the financials. Like I said, my team, we help put these together. If anyone has any questions at any time about these, we are absolutely happy to help. And we'll move on to the next page here. So we've got the current FedEx contract here. So each FedEx contractor, they have their own unique terms in their contracts, so payment terms. If you're purchasing a full business, you will inherit the terms that are currently in place. If you're inheriting a partial business or a carve out, you'll negotiate your own terms prior to close. They're all going to fall within these same buckets here, but you will negotiate your own prior to close. Again, if you're doing a carve out, to just briefly go through what each of these are and what they mean. So the service charge it's a weekly flat fee that you get no matter how many packages you deliver. If you deliver 3 packages or 3 million packages, you'll get this service charge every single week in the amount that it is. With the stop charge, these is what you get paid for every ground stop that you deliver. So every stop that you deliver to a business, you get paid. In this particular business, my fake business that I put together, gets $2.12 per ground stop that they deliver. The surge stop charge, this is an amount you get if you deliver a certain number of stops above a threshold. So say you have a weekly threshold that's set in your contract of 3,000 stops. Any amount you deliver over 3,000 stops, you would get an additional surge stop charge on top of your stop charge. That being said, it really only happens during peak season that this happens. You very rarely go over your threshold during the regular year. I've worked here 5 years. I don't think I've ever seen that happen. But it is something that happens during peak season to give you a little extra money there. The per stop fuel charge, that's to supplement fuel costs. So you do get that for every stop that you make, whether it's e-commerce or ground, you get the per stop fuel charge. One thing to note about that is it does fluctuates up and down based on the diesel prices in the area. It doesn't fluctuate very much, just a couple of cents either direction, but you will see that change on a weekly basis. The package charge here, that is for ground packages, like I said, packages that are delivered to businesses. The large package mix is paid for packages that are above certain size and weight qualifications. So if they're, above and beyond large, you get a little extra money for those. The apparel brand promotion charge is a flat fee you get for having your drivers in uniform every week. So this person would get $180 per week, just not for each driver in uniform, just a flat fee for the week for having all those drivers in uniform. The vehicle brand promotion charge is you do get that per vehicle that is properly decaled. So if you had 10 trucks that had all the right decals on them, you would get $20 per truck for the week. And then the e-commerce stop charge is very similar to the regular stop charge, but the e-commerce stop charge applies to home and smart post packages. So any packages that are delivered to a residential area or stops, that are delivered to a residential area. And then the e-commerce package charge is for those smart post and home packages. So that's a quick overview of what to expect from the rates of a contract. And then moving down a little bit, you've got your stop composition chart here. So it just shows how much of the deliveries are ground and how much of them are e-commerce. Most businesses are around 75% e-commerce to 25% ground, similar to this one here. Most of the charts look almost exactly like this. I don't see a ton of variation on that at this point anymore. And then down here, we also have how much of your contract is variable versus how much of it's fixed. So that basically means how much you're getting paid for those variable charges, which are the stop charge, the package charge, which change based on how much volume you deliver every week versus how much of your contract is the fixed charge, such as the weekly service flat fee that you get. So we'll have that in there as well. Moving to the next page territory here, we'll always have some fun facts about the delivery area. They're not necessarily pertaining to the business itself, but you see here, Elvis Presley recorded some songs in Nashville, just fun little factoids about the area. Those are always fun to read. And then we've got the route counts on here as well. So we pull these from the weekly service worksheets. Like I said earlier, as a buyer, you're definitely going to want to request that information. You'll see here, not every day runs the same amount of routes. So it's almost different every day of the week. Weekends generally have much lighter volume than weekdays. And nowadays, a lot of people aren't delivering on Sundays either in some markets. So sometimes you'll see under Sunday, you'll have a 0 on there instead of a route count. That just means they don't deliver on Sundays. Also, in addition, if you ever hear us at Route Consultant refer to the average route count, which you'll hear us say that term a lot, we average only the weekdays. So if we put the weekends in there, it would bring that route count down. So whenever we refer to that average route count, we're averaging Monday through Friday. every time. We don't include the weekends on that because it brings that number down quite a bit. Also on this page, you'll see there's a map, the zip codes included in the delivery area, and then the terminal that the business operates out of as well. And the next couple of pages are, oh goodness, fairly easy. This is the driver roster. Like I said earlier, we do put the drivers in here that are currently operating the business, but it will likely look different by the time close comes. But like I said, rates are generally fairly similar across the board. You don't normally, get rid of someone that makes $120 a day and replace them with someone who makes $250 a day. That doesn't happen a ton. It can, but generally the rates will remain similar. But these are the drivers that are currently running the business. You'll see hire dates, daily rates, their pay rates per week. And then this is where also we'll get a little bit more in depth on some of those bonuses that are offered. Like I mentioned in the benefits and bonuses section earlier, you'll see that on here. If there are any safety bonuses or per stop, bonuses or what have you, that'll be highlighted on here for specific employees. So get a little bit more detail on that. And then we'll have the managers listed on this page as well. And then we've got the vehicle list. Again, basic information on the trucks that are included in the sale, year, make, model, mileage. A couple of things to note on this page as a buyer as well is the gas and diesel. So definitely look if the fleet's gas or diesel. I would say most of the time now trucks are gas most of the time, but definitely look to see if you have a primarily diesel fleet. It can just get a little bit more expensive. And then same with the weight of the vehicle. So we do put the weight on here. If a truck is under 10,000 pounds, you have to pay overtime by law. So look to see if you have any trucks under 10,000 pounds so you can prepare yourself for that in the future, prepare yourself to pay overtime to those drivers in those vehicles. And if they're over 10,000 pounds, you don't have to pay overtime. So just something to look at the composition of the fleet when you're purchasing a business to prepare yourself for that if you have to or have to not pay overtime. So we've got a couple more pages here. I'll kind of zip through these. We've got the executive summary. Again, of course, summarizes everything that's above. And then also what you'll find on this page is possible financing terms. So if we do think the business is financeable or possibly financeable, we'll put some kind of potential terms on here of what you could expect for your monthly SBA payments or monthly conventional payments. One thing to note too, just always, I know prime is really constantly changing right now and interest rates are going up. And just changing in general. So always make sure you check the rate on here. I know with this one, I used an old template when I made it. So rates are a little bit higher now, but double check that before you take this, as gospel. And then again, every bank can be a little bit different, but again, it provides a potential payment that you might have. So that's what you'll find on this executive summary page. And then zooming through these last few, this is just general information in every prospectus. They're the same in all prospectuses. It's not business specific. So you'll find a history of FedEx Ground, competitive positioning of e-commerce, and the RC sales cycle. There's a lot of information there. Again, it's the same in every prospectus. So I won't go through and explain that today, but at your leisure, feel free to read that when you request a prospectus and get all that good information. So that's really what I've got. Said prospectuses are incredibly helpful. They're a great overview of a business to see if you're initially interested, but there are lots of things you want to ask about and information you want to gather as you move through the process. So, Annalie, you got anything to add?
No, that's so helpful. Thank you for giving us that overview. And, that I think hopefully will just give, our prospective viewers here the opportunity to get a sense for what to look for. Again, this is our prospectus, right? So you're obviously going to see different variations in the space as you look at different options, but this, hopefully just serves as a little bit of a roadmap for you of kind of what to expect. And maybe some of the big things to be looking for to influence some of those questions. Leah and her team, obviously live, eat, sleep, and breathe this analysis all day long. So she's a fantastic source of really interesting industry insights. She's who I go to say, what are we seeing in different trends within the business? So she's a great person to be able to ask questions like that too. And then again, you have that business overview. I know in a future series that we're going to be doing with Leah, she's going to also talk about one of the things that we do at Route Consultant, where we provide the prospectus, which is really a snapshot of what the business currently looks like. But then we also provide what's called an operational improvement plan, where our team has done an analysis of some things that we think potentially could be improved about that business, obviously to improve profitability and operating margins and efficiency going forward. So that is definitely a great way to kind of get a sense for the potential of the business, not just what, the current trending looks like. So it definitely fuels lots of conversations, but she's going to be back to talk to us about those at some point here in the future that we're super excited about. So as just a recap before we answer the question of the day, again, our question today, for those of you that want to submit questions in the Q&A feature at the bottom, is if you could be any animal for a day, what would you choose and why? So what animal do you feel like is living the life or representative of yourself and your personality perhaps? But before we launch into open Q&A, so feel free to drop your answers in there. And then again, questions on anything Leah covered today, or anything you want to know about the space right now, feel free to load those in the Q&A. But before we jump into those, Leah, if you could be any animal, what would you be and why?
Yeah, I put a lot of thought into this actually. I
know that
a roster of animals in my brain. I love the ocean. I love anything sea themed. Would love to explore the depths of the ocean. I would love to be an orca. I think that's what I landed on. Would be just fun to swim around all day. But also, fun fact about orcas is they have an extra part of their brain that humans don't have. And I honestly just want to know what it does. Like, I would love to be an orca just to like know what the extra part of the brain does. They're super smart. And I think we're just kind of puzzled as like, what does it do? So I think that would be a really fun mystery to solve at the same time.
That was a really well thought answer. You really did think about this. And I love it too, so Leah, for those of you, I know Leah very well. We've worked together for a long time. She's very competitive, so I can see that like killer whale, like a little bit of orca aggression in it. I love that. But also they're adorable and super smart, as you said. So I can definitely see the orca vibe, but I love how much thought you put into that. I did not know they have an additional brain space. So that is amazing. Okay, well, I don't think mine would surprise anybody, especially just given the timing of what's happening in my life. But I think that right now I'm definitely channeling like a mama lion vibes. So I thought about it for a couple different reasons, not nearly as profound as Leah's was, but for me on the mama lion piece, I definitely think I'm a pack animal. I love my people and my crew that I'm spending time with. Also, they're very protective, but there is definitely still there's that loyalty, but they're also huntresses, which I love about the lion species, that the mama lions are out there on the prowl doing the hunting, which I think is really cool. But they're also snuggly, cuddly, protective mamas. And I think one of my favorite relaxing pastimes is also sunbathing, which I feel like every awesome shot I've ever seen of a pack of lions, they're just like relaxing and sunbathing. So
yes, they definitely are.
That's going to be my pick for the day. But that being said, we're going to dive into some live Q&A now. So I will jump in with the first question. Obviously, current hot market topic right now. So we'll start here. I can't see the name on this one. It's an anonymous submission, but they said they would be a shark because they're the top of the food chain. Love that. And the first question here, kind of multiple part question, but the first one is, are banks still lending? And obviously, given with what's happened just this weekend with Silicon Bank, how is that impacting the lending market? Leah, I know you can speak to this one too. I'll give just a little bit, yes, on the current events. I think given what the typical transaction timeline looks like, everything that just transpired in the last 7 days of Silicon Bank, I don't think we've seen any of that actually flow through to the lending space. But I imagine as we've seen over the course of the last 6 months, lending is tightening, right? As a broader trend in the industry for sure. Rates are rising, as Leah talked about. And we're certainly seeing that vetting process and kind of tendency to lend tightening for sure. So I don't expect that what happened over the weekend is going to help with that trend and with that pattern. And so I think we could definitely expect to see more, cash transactions, seller finance transactions is definitely increasing, but there are still banks that are absolutely lending on these businesses. Leah, again, her team are working really closely at any given time with a variety of different banks that are, underwriting these deals. And so I think just from a macro perspective, you could expect to see some continued tightening, but Leah, would you agree that y'all are still working a significant number of bank transactions as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely agree. Just to echo your sentiment, it's still happening. Absolutely. Every single day I work with a bank or multiple banks. So definitely still in the process. It's getting a little bit more challenging. You're right. It's tightening, kind of the requirements are tightening. The quality of the businesses have to be a little bit better than maybe they used to be to get approved, but it's certainly still in the works.
And while we're on that topic, it kind of goes hand in hand. Another part of this question, Leah, is from a multiples perspective. What have you seen there? Does it seem like multiples are trending down? Is it more of a buyer's market? Happy to speak to this too, but curious about what observations you've made.
Yeah, with multiples in general, or multiples as it pertains to lending?
Multiples in general, but I think it would be helpful to hear if you have any thoughts on lending as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say multiples are going down some, staying relatively the same as well. I think I know with the bank in particular, because that's kind of the sphere that I work in mostly, banks are approving lower multiples. So that's kind of a trend that we're seeing. And I think if someone wants to get their business financed by a bank, they have to price it at a lower multiple to have that happen. Definitely we're seeing, I would say, percentages of revenue lower some. Maybe more so than multiples. Multiples, I would say, are still staying around that between 4 and 5, definitely. But the percentages of revenue are lowering a little bit. And then with banks, like I said, they're approving lower multiples. So, if you're a seller and you want to sell to get kind of a larger pool of buyers that can purchase the business, maybe sell at a lower multiple so you can get it approved by a bank.
Yeah, and there's what's interesting. I'll kind of dissect some of the pieces she just referenced there. So you have some different pieces at play, right? That one of the big things we're seeing right now is that for sellers who are looking to secure a higher multiple, that can still happen just based on demand. And again, it's going to be obviously very market dependent on whether they're in a high demand market or not. But we do see, still some listing scarcity, which helps, from a seller demand perspective. But I think what you'll see is that there's really a lot more pressure to carry more significant seller financing if you're going to, be trying to drive those higher multiples on the seller side. And so especially because as a buyer coming in, if you're going to, as Leah mentioned, successfully be able to underwrite a loan on that, with rates rising, it's requiring more cash flow or a lower purchase price in order to be able to, amortize that loan in a way that's not going to impact profitability of the business, just to make sure that the buyer can meet debt service. So it has a lot to do with whether we're talking seller financing or lending. And again, the terms of those has a much bigger impact, I think, today on where the multiples fall. But overall, we've definitely seen holistically in the space margins, multiples drop, as well as the percentage of revenue that Leah's talking about. And whereas it wouldn't have been uncommon, to be in that 100% of revenue type range, it's definitely more common to be in that 65 to 70% of revenue type range on valuations right now. So we've definitely seen that contract, but it really is business specific. And I think this is an important nuance, and kind of what Leah's speaking to is that the multiples themselves, right? We're not seeing those dramatically drop because the demand hasn't fallen off for the space. But what happens is, because we've seen the operating income, the cash flows of the business contract through just rising costs, wage pressures, fuel costs, because we've seen operating income contract. When you put that reduced operating income at the same multiple, it's going to effectively bring the purchase price down from a percentage of revenue perspective. And so that's a really important kind of distinction to say, well, multiples aren't really dropping dramatically because we're not seeing demand fall off, at least at this point. But we are seeing that percentage of revenue drop as a result of seeing, tightening in the operating margins of the businesses. And so we'll continue to keep you guys posted as we see those trends shifting for all of those different line items. But as of right now, that's really what we're seeing. So, okay, let me jump in. Let's see, to the next question is, I got a little bit enjoying that. Let's see. Oh, and also timeline. I guess this is one more part of it. And I've got another answer to this question, Leah. So while we're on banking, first of all, their elephant, or the animal that they would be, is an elephant, because they live in families, but they're also big and strong. That's super cute. Also, I always heard elephants never forget. They have amazing memories. You remember their water holes or something. But little fun animal knowledge for today to go with Leah's orca brain. But One more question, Leah, are you seeing on a timeline of transactions, do you see things taking longer or less time to sell? Any feedback on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say from a lending perspective, it always has taken a long time. So prepare yourself for that. I like to give everyone that warning. If you're planning on going through a bank, it always takes a long time. I will say I because they are tightening some of the requirements, they're requesting more information than they used to. Lenders are. So yes, I would say we're seeing those timelines extend a little bit, not terribly so. Again, they've always been a little bit long. But yes, because banks are trying to kind of cover their bases a little bit more with rising interest rates and things like that. They're requesting more information and diving a little bit more into the businesses and how they operate. So it does take a little bit longer.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see, next question. Let's see. So Leah, I know you can speak to this and happy to touch base on this as well. Also, the answer here, again, coming through anonymous, I can't see the name on this, but theirs is a bird, preferably a fast, high-flying bird, so they could have the experience of flying. Great answer. And the question is kind of two-part. So one, Leah, what is the process that a prospective buyer would go through in order to get a prospectus to see for a new listing? And if they're interested, but they're not 100% committed to purchasing yet, is what level of commitment is basically required through us to get that prospectus?
Yeah, so to get a prospectus from us, absolutely. So there's a couple ways you can do it. Like I said, if you've already been in contact with a member of the team, feel free to reach out to them, or you can submit an inquiry on our website. If there's a specific listing that you're interested in, you see we've got some snapshots of information on there as well. Of course, not as much as the prospectus, but you say, hey, maybe I'm interested in a business in Nashville. You find one in Nashville, you submit an inquiry. Once you do that, you do have to submit an NDA, so a non-disclosure, as well as a proof of funds. So once we get those two things, we're able to send you the prospectuses and then speak to you about those prospectuses and the information that's inside of it. We do our best, I would say, to provide as much information as we can up front. As a buyer, we want to make sure that you're making an informed decision about putting an offer in on a business and purchasing a business. Of course, if you submit a list of 300 items you want and you haven't put in an offer, that may not be the best look in the world, but definitely if you want settlement statements, weekly service worksheets, things like that, we're happy to give those to you really as long as you've submitted that NDA.
Yeah, that's right. Perfect. All right. So next question comes from Santiago Jaramillo, who said his animal would be a bear because they hibernate during the winter and he hates the cold weather. These are really creative. I really like them.
They're good answers.
Yeah, this is one of my, again, for my second webinar back, you guys are bringing some good quality stuff. I appreciate it. But Leah, multi-part question here. And again, I can grab some of these too, but so how do you determine whether a route should have a manager in place or not?
Yeah, so generally we see managers on businesses that have 8 routes or more. Anything less than 8 routes really can't support a full off the truck full-time manager. In rare cases it's possible, or you can have a manager that drives, so effectively a lead driver if there's less than 8 routes. That being said, we expect there to be 1 manager per about every 8 routes as well. So if you have 16 routes, 16 to 20 routes, what have you, we'd expect around 2 managers in that case. And again, 24 or more, 3 managers. So that's about the metrics that we use there.
Exactly. And then the next question is, what other options besides SBA loans are there for financing FedEx purchase?
Yeah, so absolutely. Conventional is an option as well. So if you've got a local bank that you work with that offers business loans, they can certainly help you out in a lot of cases. Some banks are not familiar with FedEx, so it may take a little bit of informing them about the space. Again, I'm totally happy to do that if you've got a local bank, or somebody on my team is happy to speak with your local bank on that as well. Conventional, they generally have slightly lower interest rates, but they have shorter terms. So that's something to consider when you're looking at banks is you will get a lower interest rate with a conventional bank in most cases, but your monthly payments may be higher because of that shorter term than the SBA. It can also be a little bit easier to get a loan through a conventional bank, particularly if it's one that you've worked with before. So those are, I would say, the two primary lending options. And then, of course, like Annalie said, seller financing, we kind of alluded to that earlier. In some cases can be supplemental to cash.
Yeah, that's right. Here's an interesting question. I can answer this one, and I can't tell exactly if this is the right answer, so I'm going to read this one, but I've got an anonymous that looks like it could be this. So they said a cheetah because of the speed and agility. Amy, I'm not sure if that's your answer, but I'm going to give you credit for it and answer your question. So Amy Behar's question, first of all, she said, great presentation, Leah. And she wanted to know, is there a way to receive these slides afterwards or to see information on this? I can kind of speak to this a little bit too, because ultimately, one, we are going to post this webinar live to our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to go out and check back and check out the content there and see the slides there. But also, if you inquire on literally any one of our listings, you're going to get a virtually identical packet that just has specifics to that particular listing. So that's really the best way, but you're welcome to reach out directly to our team to get kind of a sample of any one of these. So let's see, next question. Oh, you know what? And Santiago had one more question I didn't answer, I forgot, is what is a typical job description of a manager and how is that different than the owner? Do you want to take a crack at that one, Leah, or you want me to take that one?
I probably could answer some of it. You probably could answer it a little bit more thoroughly than I can, but I would say definitely with a manager, some of their primary responsibilities are being a backup driver, of course, particularly if you've got an off the truck manager. If you've got someone that calls out or multiple people that call out and you need someone to hop on a truck, the manager would be one of the people to do that. Many of them handle kind of route planning, DRO, I believe. Many owners will handle kind of the recruiting side of things, processing payroll, those types of things. It can, be negotiated, I would say, between each different business, but I would say those are some of the primary things that I know of. Annalee, you can probably give a little bit more detail.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And really, I think one of the, so part of why there's some vaguity here too, is that it's going to vary contractor to contractor. And that's why when Leah was talking through the prospectus page on the management structure, we're going to give you some initial highlights in that background, but that's one of the best, like when you do a buyer seller call or in those meetings that lead up to actually closing on the business, that's one of the best uses of time and interactions with the seller is really refining those tasks and responsibilities based on who's doing what. So some big things you definitely want to know is as far as like payroll processing goes in a week, again, we generally recommend trying to keep administrative tasks like that off of the manager and off of your, we'll say BC, business contact. It's kind of synonymous with manager, right? So we would typically, recommend keeping things like that off of your manager and your BC. And that needs to be more of an administrative function, probably done by the owner or if you end up being large enough to have some administrative support there, or a third party like vendor solution that helps with payroll, but you want to minimize that. But I do know a lot of operators where their BCs are handling a decent amount of payroll. So that's a big one to ask. Another big one to clarify is, so the DRO and route planning on a nightly basis, that's something that happens every evening, where you need to basically go into FedEx's technology solution and build out the routes for the next day. So super important part of the process. It's, one of the things I think a lot of people get really wrong. So we have some amazing internal solutions that are really focused on the DRO piece, but you definitely want your manager capable of running point on that. But not all managers are very good with DRO. And so that's a really important piece to focus on. Something else that's pretty common is to make sure you get a good grasp of what the responsibilities look like from a recruiting and driver onboarding perspective. So again, typically we would say outsource the recruiting solution and let your manager focus more on the day-to-day dispatching of the vehicles, managing the DRO and the efficiency, dealing with safety and safety incidents with the drivers, coaching on safety, and then also fleet maintenance, right? Making sure that the trucks are serviced appropriately and shuttled in accordingly for those different inspections. So that's the stuff we really want to see our managers and our BCs focused on. But sometimes we'll see them also taking on some recruiting responsibilities and staffing up the business. Again, want to clarify what roles they have there, but then definitely like onboarding those drivers and getting them up and running as you hire new drivers is a pretty common function for those BCs. So that's just a high level snippet. We also have an amazing BC training course that it's probably one of the most popular products we've ever offered. It's a totally virtual course that our operations managers put together. And so you should definitely check out the BC course if you want real specifics on what a day in the life looks like, but they go extensively into the day in the life content. We cover that at our summit too, but lots of at least that gives you a good high level. So the next question I wanted to jump on, let's see, is with I wanted to just address this too. Tyler Glass had a quick question about how to get follow-up information on a listing. If you've had an initial interaction with the broker, but you've got some other information, you can reach back out to that broker, but you can also always call our hotline and let them know that you've got some follow-up questions. So, or shoot us an email at info@routeconsultant.com, and they'll make sure that you get connected with somebody that gets you those answers, Tyler. And also he said he would be an otter because he wishes he could float in the ocean all day, which is great. And then one kind of higher market level question that I'll give you credit for, anonymous. Again, I can't always tell with the anonymous who's answering these questions, but they would also love to be a bird so they could fly south every winter and escape the cold. So a couple questions here. First of all, they're asking about the AVP program. So kind of some pros, cons, and how to learn more about that. And for those of you that don't know, AVP is the Alternative Vehicle Program. It's basically the easiest way I can describe this if you're learning about it for the first time is it's sort of like the Uber of package delivery, right? And so contractors have the option of enrolling drivers and vehicles into the Alternative Vehicle Program so they can do deliveries that aren't kind of standard in a box truck or a Sprinter van. The main reason that contractors will do that is just because of the driver qualifications to be able to get drivers on board through the Alternative Vehicle Program, and to just have that kind of flexibility of a different style of delivery. We aren't a huge fan of the Alternative Vehicle Program, primarily from a liability perspective. So your main downside there is just that the blanket liability protections that exist for us as FedEx contractors from FedEx Ground, which is one of the biggest advantages of this space, do not carry over to the Alternative Vehicle Program. And so that's kind of one of the biggest concern points, I would say, typically for folks considering using that I would say is important from an insurance implications and, again, indemnification and liability if there is an incident. So important piece there. And then their other question here would be with some of the markings of potentially a recession on the rise. Do we have expectations that FedEx is going to renew operating contracts with lower payment structures? And so I just wanted to touch on that really fast. We do not have that expectation. And really, in fact, quite the opposite. A lot of the communications that we've heard are hinting to and suggesting we may see rate increases effective, like literally with contracts negotiated this month and forward. So that's actually something we're hoping for and expecting within the space, is that we may actually see some increasing rates. FedEx did a big rate increase on their customers in the fall winter time, and so we're hoping to see some of that flow through to offset some of the increased costs that we've seen as operators. And a lot of the communications that we've heard suggest that should be coming through and coming down the pipeline for the operators. And so we're definitely hopeful to start seeing those as new March contracts come through. So quite the opposite, but again, everything is as unknown, right? When you see those market shifts. But what I would say is historically, we've seen this be a really recession resistant industry. Primarily if you don't have too much debt service over the business, because you have the ability to flex up and flex down in routes and employees to basically mirror your revenues with your overhead costs, again, if you don't have too much debt service. So some important considerations for sure on that side. I know we're just about to run out of time. So let me see if I can pick one more really good one. And then let's see, I'll do, oops. Oh, again, this is anonymous. I can't see what the question is, but I think this is a good question. So I'll hit with this one is, what would you say the biggest barriers to entry are for entering the contracting space? So I'll answer that one. Leah, unless do you have any, you want me to take that one? Yeah. I'll take that one. And then really quick, I want to tell you guys about some of the events coming up, and then we'll wrap. So biggest barriers to entry, I would say, for entering this space is, obviously it's going to be funding. I think you proposed that in your question, whoever that was is it money? And yes, obviously that's going to be the biggest piece, is being able to secure the financing or, bring enough initial liquidity to the table to make the purchase. So that's obviously going to be your number one eliminator. I think past that, you do have to get through an interview with FedEx Ground. And so it's going to be making sure that you're bringing the right skills to the table to be a successful operator, and that you're able to create that impression as well with FedEx Ground. And so again, you know, a lot of the work that we do with clients is helping educate them on the space so that they do really understand what they're signing up for. This is definitely not a space that's for everybody. And so it's important to understand, you know, what you're signing up for, the climate, how to be successful in this industry. And so again, that's what we spend a lot of time working with clients on. But those are going to be probably your two biggest barriers to entry, because again, the businesses themselves, you know, you're typically purchasing something that's very established and it's running. So as long as you've got, you know, the right skills to support it, there's really not a lot of other barriers to entry. So last piece is just to tell you guys what's coming up, and then we'll conclude is, so from an events perspective, in March 30th, we're going to be in Kansas City for our Line Haul Roadshow. So we'd love to see you guys there. It's going to be a fully line haul focused event. And we would love to, again, have you guys visiting us here in just a couple weeks in Kansas City. And then on April 20th, we're going to have a fully fleet focused roadshow actually here in Nashville at our office. So we're really excited about that. It's going to be a chance for clients to come here and see, you can see this lovely backdrop that you guys are used to seeing in webinars, meet with our team. Again, we're super excited about the Nashville event. That's going to be April 20th. And so that's the next two big events that we have coming up. We would love to see you guys there. Danielle just dropped a link in the chat to these upcoming events. So if you want to register, let us know that you're planning to show up either in Nashville on April 20th or in Kansas City on March 30th. We would love to have you at both of those. So that's what we have for today. Leah, thank you so much for being here. That was awesome.
Thank you.
So excited to have you on the webinar. That was really helpful information. She is such a source of knowledge, you guys. So we will have her back in the future. So you can come with questions ready to rock and roll for Leah, but we appreciate all the great questions today. And Leah, we appreciated the content. So
yeah. Awesome.
Thank you. We will see you guys same time, same place next week, but thank y'all for being here. Bye, everybody.